There is a place not over the rainbow, but in North Carolina, that is surrounded by mystery and myth. A place that people say doesn't exist anymore. Home to talking tin men, walking scarecrows, and ruby slippers. Maybe even, talking chicken? High up in the mountain, a place took those who visited to the land of Oz. Regularly called a failure and often touted as an abandoned theme park, its story goes a little bit deeper than that. This time, we don't have to wind up TikTok to tell us what happened to North Carolina's Emerald City. We just have to follow the slightly abandoned and stolen Yellow Brick Road. First published in the year 1900, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum took children on an adventure with Dorothy, the Kansas farm girl who gets swept away from their home by a tornado into the magical land of Oz. The book was an instant success, selling out both its first and second editions. Baum had taken inspiration from his own life to create the novel, as well as from the fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen, and Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Baum wanted to take his imaginative book and create more from it. In 1906, in an interview, he reported that he had just purchased land on an island off the coast of California called Pedlo to create a live-in version of The Wizard of Oz that people could visit. A fairy tale paradise for children. Instead, he took to a liking to Coronado Beach and resided at hotels there for months at a time writing further novels. His idea for an Oz park never came, and there was no actual evidence found that he had even purchased the island, or one that even resembles the Pedlo name existing in the area. By 1938, the book had sold more than 1 million copies, with many adaptations of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz being made. From Broadway musicals to silent films, none could match the success of the 1939 film, The Wizard of Oz.
Many, many miles east of nowhere lies the amazing land of Oz, a magnificent empire created in the mind of a man who wrote a great book about it. Like wildfire in the wheat field, the fabulous tale of the Wizard of Oz spread from town to city, to nation, to the entire world.
The film would use cutting-edge technology to bring the whimsical world to the big screen, becoming one of the most well-known movies ever made, and perhaps even more successful than the book it was based on. The film didn't damper the book's success, at least, with it going on to even bigger sales. By 1956, the original children's book would have sold 3 million copies. That same year, it would also enter the public domain for copyright. Throughout history, there have been many mentions of the Wizard of Oz characters and themes appearing at amusement parks, fairs, and shopping centers throughout the United States. But it would be a trio of brothers that would plan to build the most prominent tourist attraction based on them ever. In the mid-1950s, Grover Robbins, a lumberman, returned to his hometown of Blowing Rock, North Carolina. Tired of the industry, he purchased a railroad and train that he saw had potential. While the Boone area had little enthusiasm for the plans, with help from his brothers Harry and Spencer, they scrapped together the money to make it happen. He said those days, having your own steam train was like owning a dinosaur. People wanted to see it. The brothers would put their ideas into the creation of Tweetsie Railroad, a place that would become the state's very first theme park. Opening just a few years after Disneyland, it would feature an excursion train ride pulled by an iconic coal-fired steam locomotive. Using the popular at the time Wild West theme, the brothers created the most popular tourist attraction in the area, bringing in families from all over the state. Inspired by their success, they would create their second attraction, this time in the Smoky Mountains. Rebel Railroad opened in 1961. Today, called Dollywood. The brothers had no plans to slow down, developing tourist attractions all throughout the mountains, and it wouldn't be long until the group came up with their next idea. Something bigger, offering more, and taking you not only up a mountain, but into the land of Oz.
Take a close look. See anything familiar? How about the constant activity, the haste, the pressure? No, you don't know Jim, but you know the symptoms. The answer, Jim thinks, must be away. A place away from the demands, the pressure, the unrelenting cycle. Someone has told Jim Crimmins about a place high in the grandeur of North Carolina's mountains, at a town called Banner Elk. And the man tells him, we are building such a place.
At an area known as Beech Mountain, a former popular lumbering area that was becoming increasingly popular for skiing, and more people wanted to experience it. A dentist from Birmingham, Alabama, purchased a large area of Beech Mountain land to build his planned ski resort on top of the mountain. After the purchase, the owner had begun becoming more involved in politics, and rather than develop the resort, he would sell it in 1962 to a group named the Appalachian Development Corporation, the company owned by the Robbins brothers. After the big success of Tweetsie, Rebel Railroad, and their resorts, they planned to develop their new biggest resort yet. With plenty of space on top of the 5,506-foot mountain, they formed ideas for what would be their third major tourist destination.
You can visit the parking lot of this place and discover where these skiers come from. They are almost all Southerners, they are mostly beginners, and they are skiing here at Beech Mountain, North Carolina.
Beech Mountain had some of the highest slopes in the area, and Americans had more and more money to spend on leisure activities. The timing seemed just right. With a total investment plan of $5 million, this new resort would be incredibly ambitious. A total resort community that didn't ruin the mountain, but embraced it. The 8,000-acre site will be home to a mountaintop village, one of the most extensive ski lift facilities in the country, 4 18-hole golf courses, planned multiple home residential developments, and more. The ski area opened in 1967. As the site continued development in 1969, a $3.5 million monorail built by Arrow Development was announced. Sadly, it never happened, but the plans wouldn't end there. Grover Robbins wanted this to be a year-round facility, not just operating when the ski lifts would be busy in the winter. He would build his third theme park on the mountain, and to design it, they would turn to their close friend, Jack Pentes, who had worked on various projects at Tweetsie. The Charlotte-based artist, founder of the Carolina Clowns, collector of Mickey Mouse memorabilia, and the man who would later go on to create the concept of soft play equipment, would be perfect for the job. The brothers would take him up the mountain to try and come up with the idea at the top. The windswept trees instantly made him think of one thing: The Wizard of Oz, and then throwing apples at the characters in the movie. Jack was convinced when he saw a natural cave that it could be Oz, and he began planning it on his knees from a childlike perspective. Announced in 1968, the Charlotte artist, along with his associate, Joe Sonderman, would turn the mountaintop into the wonderful land of Oz, a themed outdoor park said to be of the Disneyland caliber, on a much smaller budget, that would not ruin but fit naturally into the surrounding setting. After Pentes suggested using the Oz theme for the park, work on the idea began quickly. The timing of the announcement was somewhat helped by another boost in popularity for The Wizard of Oz, though a somewhat sad one. In 1969, Judy Garland would pass away, bringing the characters and stories of Oz to the forefront of people's minds once again. In early 1970, MGM announced an auction for all of its warehouses of props and costumes, and for the under-construction Wizard of Oz theme park in North Carolina, it provided the perfect opportunity to help get authentic costumes and props for the park. Spencer Robbins was sent to Hollywood with a $25,000 budget to purchase as many costumes and props from The Wizard of Oz as possible. He wouldn't be the only one, and his main bidding competition for the items came from former MGM actress Debbie Reynolds, a huge collector of movie memorabilia. Spencer Robbins made a deal with Reynolds that if she would refrain from bidding on any Oz artifacts, she could display them during the park's closed winter months at her museum for no cost. Not only did she agree, she signed up to be a special guest at the grand opening of the park. The timing and shipping of the items with Reynolds made the movement of them impractical, and she never did receive the items each winter. The park's music was created by Lunis McGlowan, who created some incredible songs over his lifetime. With his help, they were able to get the rights to use the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow within the park. Dorothy's new songs were recorded onto tape by singer Mary Mayo, with her daughter Laurie recording Dorothy's audio speaking parts. The entertainment and dances used throughout the park were choreographed by Alice Leggett Lamar. 3 years in the making, the Land of Oz, atop Beech Mountain, opened on June 15, 1970, with a ribbon-cutting ceremony welcoming 4,000 people on the first day. Debbie Reynolds, along with her daughter Carrie Fisher, 7 years before Star Wars, helped cut the ribbon with many tourism executives in attendance. Not everything at the park was ready for opening day, but within the first month, nearly 40,000 people visited the attraction, paying $3 each. It didn't lay over the rainbow or take a flying sofa moose to get to reach the Land of Oz. Those visiting had a choice of transportation, either the ski lift or a bus which would drive up the mountain roads. When reaching the top, the first area found would be the Oz Museum, containing the movie props that had been purchased. The next stop would be the Judy Garland Memorial Overlook. Judy Garland was originally in talks to attend the park opening before her death. The Overlook was dedicated to her. As your visit continued, you could see the Gale Farm. Rather than being a shack like in the book or the house of the movie, the farmhouse was designed after the one in the famous American Gothic painting. Inside, it was filled with antiques. The barn served as a petting zoo where children could interact with farm animals. The sound of roaring winds picked up as visitors were ushered into the storm cellar, a dark maze of noise, music, and blacklight walls. After you experienced the tornado, you came out again into the farmhouse, but this time everything inside was tilted, as if slammed into the ground. The effect was often used in haunted shack-style attractions, but the seamless connection to the storm tunnel gave a unique experience. Outside, visitors caught their first glimpse of the iconic yellow brick road, made of 40,000 bricks, which were specifically made to withstand any temperature. They were yellow glazed so that they never needed painting, and pebbled to prevent slipping. Only one tree, those which inspired the design in the first place, was cut down to make way for the yellow brick road. Holes were cut in many of the buildings to keep existing trees in place. Next, visitors would find themselves in Munchkin Land, full of tiny houses. No munchkins could be found in the area, but on special occasions they would dress up children in the original costumes from the movie which they had purchased. The Dorothys within the park wore red shoes, and able to use the word red slippers as they were created by MGM. In the book, she wore silver shoes. The majority of the time, each group would have a Dorothy join you as your guide down the road. As you progress through the attraction, you would encounter the characters from the book in mini show experiences, often incorporating song and dance. Based on original designs by Jack Pentes, in costumes made by the Brooks Costume Company of New York, they would use chin straps to appear like they were talking to you using pre-recorded voice tracks recorded on tape. As you continued your journey, you would encounter the Wicked Witch, who was much more comical than the movie version. Eventually, you would find yourself at the Emerald City, filled with the Rainbow Restaurant, gift shops, a 15-minute musical show where you would see the characters together for the first time, the Lion would get his courage, the Tin Man his heart, Scarecrow his brain, and Dorothy her heart's desire to return to Kansas. Sadly, Bellina was nowhere to be found. The show ended with an arrangement of Over the Rainbow, the only music used not created by Lunis McGlowan. During this segment, Dorothy disappears from the stage in a puff of smoke, before reappearing in one of the hot air balloons above the crowd waving goodbye. Of course, for a theme park, there had to be a ride. The balloons would be the one inside of the park. It remained open during the show, and the Dorothy double would board it with guests covered up before revealing herself for the final moment. The ride was built by a North Carolina company and modeled on a standard ski lift mechanism. It took you on a scenic ride over the shops and trees of the area. This also served as the exit point of the whole attraction after you had explored the Emerald City.
Up and over the rainbow at the pinnacle, there is a fabled place called the Land of Oz. It has become the leading tourist attraction in North Carolina. Here you can follow the yellow brick road
and meet the characters along the way.
By the end of the first year, over 300,000 people had visited the Land of Oz. It was announced in newspapers as the year's most outstanding tourist development, and its future looked bright. A fantasy land built into nature that carried you over the rainbow. A place that was built while preserving the mountain's natural beauty that was universally praised by those who visited. Land of Oz continued to be popular in the following seasons, staying mostly the same with its performances, music, and museum artifacts wowing those who visited. Walking the yellow brick road was loved by many who visited the small yet successful park in the mountains. Sadly, it wouldn't last long, and in 1975, a section of the park would be destroyed, and this time not by the Gnome King. Behind the scenes, not all was going well for the location's owners, Carolina Caribbean Corporation. Their filing for Chapter 10 bankruptcy was said to be due to low visitors during the ski season, but it was later revealed it was also due to poor cash management. During the restructuring, the Land of Oz did open in June 1975, and it was again profitable during the season. The company's future, however, looked uncertain, even if the park itself was shining bright and still had promise. That was until the night of December 28, 1975, when a catastrophic fire swept through parts of the Emerald City, destroying much of the main building, theater, and gift shops in the surrounding area. The cause of the fire was never truly determined, but the general opinion was that it was arson, during a theft of the MGM movie costumes and props, which were held in the museum on the other side of the park. It was reported at the time that many items had been taken, including the dress worn by Judy Garland in the film. The fire and the theft have become the story of mystery and myth for decades. The real truth of what happened is still mostly unknown. Many places state the props and dress were lost in the fire, but that would have not been possible considering it was on the complete other side of the park. Another lost dress has been found that Judy Garland wore in the movie. The location of the one missing from the Land of Oz still remains unknown to this day. Destroyed in the fire, along with the theater, was the building that housed the characters of the theme park's costumes. The park was looking up to $600,000 to repair fully. Pentes drove up to the park shortly after and said it felt like when you had to go home when there is a death in the family. The Land of Oz was his baby, and the park's future, and if it could recover, was unknown. Just 5 months later, in April 1976, it was announced that the theme park would reopen on schedule. The bankrupt Carolina Caribbean Corporation would be out, and instead, it would be operated by Resort Management Inc., who had been appointed by Tri-South mortgage investors on a 5-year agreement. The real estate investment trust held a mortgage on the Land of Oz and had reclaimed the property under the reorganization proceedings, with a plan to turn the resort into what it hoped would be its most successful yet, with its winter skiing program and the summer Land of Oz theme park. RMI had a rapid construction schedule to bring the park back to life within just 3 months. They planned to expand the Emerald City with a new theater, though it would never quite be the same and grand as it was before. They also redesigned the new character costumes and updated audio-visual equipment, coming to a cost of $250,000. The decision to reopen the park was on how successful it had been in its opening 5 years. In 1975, it was still bringing in 120,000 people and making a profit of around $90,000. The characters had a complete redesign, with a new show, but the majority of the experience remained similar to what it was before, with the addition of a puppet show. The 1976 season attracted 75,000 visitors. During the next few years, however, under the 5-year contract of RMI, attendance slowly dropped year after year. With the emergence of more and more amusement parks, with bigger and bolder rides appearing throughout the USA, specifically Carowinds, newer and bolder movies hitting the silver screen, and a changing economy with the gas crisis, it was tough for the small little mountain attraction to compete. The 1980 season had its lowest attracted attendance of 60,000 visitors, and it would be announced that the 5-year contract would not be extended and Land of Oz would not reopen. Jack Pentes once again came up with a plan to develop and update the Land of Oz in August August of 1980, with new concepts to overhaul the park and bring it up to date with new attractions being added every year through 1987. Due to the estimated $3 million price tag, it was not worth to go ahead with the plan and the park would be closed instead. The owners began searching for investors to refurbish and reopen the park, with the possibility of it coming back was still hoped for. Little investment had been put into the park since it had been reopened. Areas of it were quite run down and it would not be cheap to bring it up to scratch and bring people back. At a minimum, $165,000 was required just for essential missed maintenance, after the park had stood basically abandoned for over 9 months. During that time, security had to be increased and buildings were boarded up as many urban explorers tried to gain access to the property. The nature of the area had also taken its toll on the buildings left up in the mountain. Jack Pentest remained sad that his creation was falling apart, but said he would rather see it closed than operate in its now damaged form. No investors came and the Land of Oz sat abandoned. After a few years, the balloon ride still stood rusting, and the rebuilt Emerald City was in shambles. The once top tourist attraction in North Carolina was becoming a distant memory. For 5 years, it sat deteriorating. Eventually, the Emerald City was bulldozed to make room for a planned gated residential development named Emerald Mountain. The balloon ride was reported to have been purchased by a New York company who were on their way to tear it down.
It's just a yellow brick.
No, Bellina, you don't understand. This was the yellow brick road.
Oh.
It leads to the Emerald City.
Soon, there'll be no one left who remembers Oz.
The Land of Oz, though, wouldn't be forgotten. After the removal of the Emerald City, Emerald Mountain Realty took over the property with the goal of development while turning the extinct park into an enchanting private garden, restoring what remained of the yellow brick road and more. One of their first goals was to prevent any further demolition or damage to what was left of Oz. Sections of the park were saved, including the Gale farmhouse, barn, and some of the yellow brick road. On July 4th, 1991, sections of the park were reopened as part of Beach Mountain's Independence Day celebration, and to celebrate the start of its redevelopment into condo complexes, visitors could return to Oz, and this time it wouldn't be nearly as terrifying as the movie of that name. Students appeared as characters from The Wizard of Oz, and you could visit Dorothy's house, which was then the home of the property owner, to see props from the movie. Luckily, no Wheelers had moved in, and it didn't take an egg to save it. Its future as an abandoned theme park would change when a reunion for the original park employees, known as Ozzies, began. The Land of Oz key had been wound back up. What would become the Autumn of Oz event saw 100 to 200 people come together to talk about their memories of a place that meant so much for them. The event began to grow, and by the year 2000, over 1,000 people were attending the now public event. By 2010, over 8,000 people would attend. Each year since, the once thought doomed Land of Oz would open during the autumn for special events, proving the original plan still had merit, and just like Jack Pumpkinhead himself, piece by piece, what remained of Oz was restored. Autumn of Oz once again just finished its successful opening for 2022, bigger and better than ever, with arts and crafts, live performances, character meet and greets, and while the original Emerald City and balloon ride is no more, a small temporary one is created for those visiting the special event. It will return again in 2023. The park today celebrates its history, The Wizard of Oz, and more, with private events, tours, and the Autumn of Oz.
What are we gonna do now?
I wish all of us from Oz to return there safely. And for the Emerald City and all the people in it to be restored to life.
The Land of Oz never really was abandoned, not completely, and it continues with the same heart it did when it opened, inviting you to take a nostalgic stroll down the yellow brick road. The money made from these events goes directly back into restoring the park. You can even rent out Dorothy's home and explore the park on a private tour. Over the years since, more and more, piece by piece, has returned to Oz. Even what is believed to be the very last balloon ride vehicle from the ride in existence.
Oz is something very special. I think everyone who has had anything to do with Oz gets this feeling. I think it's more than just the fact that the story of the Wizard of Oz was the most popular story, children's story of the last 100 years. There isn't a child in America who's ever watched TV that hasn't seen the story, knows it by heart, who's had it read to them, who've read it themselves. And so Oz is more than a family theme park. I like to consider it as an American heritage. It's part of Americana, and it has three lovely things put together. A beautiful, beautiful mountaintop. It has man-made facilities that fit so nicely with that, and then you add the magical fantasy to it, and you have Oz.
Just 6 months before the park was set to open in 1970, Grover Robbins passed away from bone cancer, never seeing the completed version of the park open that he and his brothers had created. The Land of Oz has been special for so many people over the years, and Grover and his two brothers' impact on the tourism industry in the area can still be felt today, with their creations Tweetsie Railroad, Rebel Railroad, and the Land of Oz still in one form or another, allowing families and people from all over the world to create incredible memories and be whisked away to themed areas that can normally only be imagined. Jack Pentis passed away in 2015 at the age of 83. The Pentis Way was a staple of the early days of the Land of Oz theme park, with everything designed to look perfect for children to experience the wonder of Oz. His obituary states that Jack Pentis rode his motorcycle sidecar over the rainbow, an inspiration to generations of artists and children around the world.
It was just a magic place and a magic time. It was the love of my life. I will never, ever get over it. And the sadness of my life that it's not there anymore. And I've learned to live with that. I guess through being grateful for the joy that it did create for the time that it was here.
Many places list the Land of Oz as one of the most unique abandoned theme parks in the world, but the truth is, it never really was abandoned for long, and has never been by those who continue to make it a special place today. The Land of Oz has often been called a failed park, but its promise to take you into the world of the Wizard of Oz still runs strong today. Unlike the movie, Land of Oz was not just a dream, but a reality. While it has a different look from how it did all those years ago, the feel, love, and imagination still remain. Its story is one of constant love and care from the many, many people who had been part of it since opening in 1970. A bittersweet story of an extinct park that still exists for many to enjoy and support. Shut for multiple years, it rose again as a special, reimagined and restored theme park, now partially back as a place not only taking you over the rainbow, but back in time, allowing those who want to return to Oz. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Expedition Extinct. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to join the expedition. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram for updates on upcoming episodes, and a special thank you to our Patreons for supporting the channel. We will see you next time.
Be the Queen of Oz, dude.